Hello and welcome to another Reaper blog tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I've taken kind of a loop and turned it into more or less a song. I'm going to show you some of the actions that I've used, sort of my process. I wasn't really sure what to do today, so I just figured I would kind of show you what I've been working on recently. So let's start off looking at the drum kit. These are all one-shots that came from the Prism drum library that I showed like last Friday. And I know I spent a lot of time talking about how good the contact interface was, but I was just kind of like just browsing the library, and I was just started dropping stuff into the track, and that's kind of how I work. I go with the flow. If I find something I like, I'll just drop it into the session. If I'm inspired, I'll just start with that. I don't know how I would get back to the exact same drum sounds if I had to go back into the contact instrument. So here's the beat. So I've had this beat going, and then I added in a sort of a bass sound. Sounds like this. And this is from Thorn CM. Using the arpeggiator, built-in effects, I'm just taking the highs out of this, kind of just to get rid of the harshness that comes with this glitch effect. And solo that. And originally I had this repeat function. And I messed around with this. It was a lot higher when I just first started with it. I like how that sounds, but it didn't quite work. It almost ended up being too repetitive, but also not too much in the background. So pre-effects, so the filter effects and sample rate reduction goes through the EQ. And that's all. The reverb's barely doing anything. Just kind of pushes it back and makes it wider. All right, so that was kind of the bass synth that I started out with, and I started experimenting with the distortion on it. Which made it sound really cool, and I figured that would be a good way to use that sound as a different section of the song. So I ended up duplicating the track, and that became this one. Just unmute these. Which sounds pretty cool, and I did do some automation in the actual song. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Those two bass lines don't ever play together. And then along with that, I needed some melodies. So I've got another Thorn CM with a different preset, and that is called Pad Keys. Not using the glitch synth or the arpeggiator. There's a bit of delay, a bit of reverb on it. Here's how that sounds. I actually have two different takes. So that's like the first melody sort of line. And I've got a pad here as well. This is from Podolsky Yuhi plugin. I just went through the presets, ended up with like the fourth one in there. It's using the arpeggiator So it's just this descending arpeggiator line. There's a bit of delayed chorus on it just to kind of like fill in the gaps. So like together it sounds like this. I built the beat by just dropping in stuff on the timeline. Maybe one interesting thing I did with the hat. Something I did with the hats was to just put them on 2 separate tracks. So then if I wanted, I could mute one and have 1/8 notes or have 16th notes. There's a little bit of EQ on this. Like it's not doing a lot, but it's just to make that sound different. So in addition to a volume difference between the 1/8 notes and the 16th notes, there's a bit of EQ difference there. I really just took that 1/8 note, copied it across, and then switched my grid to 16ths and duplicated it and nudged it over. This is a really easy thing to do. So going back to the full track, and I've got everything unmuted so we can hear this track. And I may get some dropouts because I'm screen recording right now, but I think I've got it pretty stable right now. So here's what I got so far. So that long fade out on that synth is actually not even any automation. It's just the excessive amount of compression that Devil Lock does to this synth. So let me just play like the last little section here without it. You still hear the delay, but with Devil Lock on it, you really hear the delay. So that tail almost becomes as loud as the notes. And it has a different feel than cranking up the feedback on the delay or changing the mix of it. So this will compress everything while the synth is going. And when the synth is not going, you're just getting the tail. That was almost accidental. I wanted to just compress those notes a bit, and I realized that the tail comes up in a really interesting way. And you can hear that again in this section. I thought that was a pretty effective way of doing that transition. There's also this sound here. It's just a reversed huge clap. And that could probably actually start even earlier. I'd start that there. All right, so how did I get from this sort of loop here into this full sort of arrangement where I've got things coming in and out and I've got automation, all that kind of stuff? Let's say it started with number 3. I'm just going through and muting things and building an arrangement. And often I'm auditioning that with my control surface. So I have an 8 fader controller and it has mute and volume buttons on it. I can just play a loop and just try out different things by muting and unmuting. And then when I find something I like, I'll mute the items instead of the tracks. And so that's why you see this. Most of these tracks have things on them, but they're muted. And anything that's not like that, like these ones, like Analog Lab track, this is stuff that I added after. I didn't show you Analog Lab, so I'll show you that now. So that's a Solina. Play that. It's just this pad sound. So that has a bit of sidechain compression on it. That's why you kind of hear it duck down a little bit. So this is compressed by the drum group. So most of these synths, Thorn, I guess all the bass synths and this pad have sidechain compression. The shortcut to do that is you insert recomp on the track you want to compress, then you drag and drop from the routing button of like the drum folder or just the kick, something like that. You just drag it on and you'll get this pop-up and it will automatically route it to inputs 3 and 4. And then you pretty much just have to set this auxiliary input to left plus right. I actually have a preset that I set up and I just kind of tweak that from there. That does the routing. It does kind of the basic threshold and ratio and RMS size that I like. Anyway, you always experiment with it because every tempo is going to be different. The shape of the kick, all that kind of stuff makes a difference. So what else? Then I'm using some automation here. So this bass synth from Thorn has distortion on it. It has the harmonic filter being used. Yeah, there's the distortion there. So with this, I'm doing the harmonic filter balance. That's this knob here. the harmonic filter shape. That's this one. And I'm also using the post low pass distortion adjustment. I found it nice to kind of accent using automation of the distortion to accent like beat 4, where there's not really anything else happening. The intro I'm using Filter Jam from Audio Thing. I showed this once before. I tried the same sort of effect with just a regular EQ. I am actually using EQ in here as well. Let's shrink these so we can see both at the same time. And I'm not really liking this effect, but it kind of does the effect that I want. Anyways, here's how that sounds by itself. Without re-EQ here, it's going to be really bassy, and so that's why you see me automating the low shelf. So just a couple notes there that really stand out. It would be a problem in mastering or even mixing. I can't help myself but do a bit of mix type automation and things like that in there. So one of the actions that I found really helpful was this script, extend items to full length. I was using that because every time I would copy a region, like if I take region 2 and command drag, you see that little plus there, that will duplicate that region. So now I got region 16 right beside that. It's a copy of everything here. But if we look closely at these items, there's a split here. And so I could use this action, extend item to full length, and that would kind of get rid of that problem area. But another thing that helped was this option, show overlapping media in lanes. And see, even though I've extended those items to the full length, got rid of that split in the middle, it has actually kind of duplicated the items. So we would want to do that, and then we can turn off that overlapping items thing again. But anyways, I was using that to kind of correct issues that would happen when duplicating regions. I want to listen to this intro again and see if I can figure out what is missing here. I think I just don't like the mid-range of this. Yeah, I think I might just leave it like that. So yeah, let's just write that in. I'm going to do it kind of manually. So I move the frequency, and then I'm going to run an action. That one that will show the high frequency shelf, and I'll show you what that action actually is. Show hide track envelope for last touched effects parameter. And so I'm going to put in a point here where I want that automation to end. I'm just going to grab the first point and drag it down to like something like there. We can change the curve of it. I kind of like these sort of shallow S curves. We'll see how it sounds. Actually, you know what? I don't want any sort of transition until maybe right the last beat. Let's try that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Some of these sections sound a bit repetitive, like sections 3 and 4 are the same. What I could do to make that a little more dynamic is probably some adjustment of the filter, the harmonic filter in Thorn. As you can see, that really changes the sound of it, as well as the shape. So that's something that we could adjust to give this a little more motion throughout these longer sections. So maybe one way I like to do to kind of make it consistent is to put in a automation item for like the length of that section, and then just drag the edge out and it'll loop. So then I could maybe, this was the balance. So I'm going to start by pulling it down and just bring it up in the middle, I guess. Yeah, like exactly in the middle. Maybe not to full, but something like that. Let's see how that sounds. That's a little too gradual. Let's just bring that up like that. Okay, so it looks like that's just a little bit too slow. I'm sorry if this is like boring at this point. I'm kind of just trying to figure this out for my own purposes. So I'm also going to automate that other thing, the shape control. So I just do that action again, bring that in, draw in that automation item. Gonna make this like a lot shorter. Put a curve in the middle. All right, another really obvious thing I could put in here is that region 8, I could put in some sort of transition effect to get into the next section. So like a white noise swell or something like that. Yeah, so I'm going to insert that on a new track. Close my dock and bring that up to the drum folder. I'll reverse it. So right click, item settings, and reverse active take. And I want to line that up so that it ends probably right there. Yeah. Let's see how that goes. And I always put in a fade like that, usually this sort of curve. Yeah, that works a lot better. Put in this fade to there and then do a very short fade out like that. And some effects we can put on here. I like things like the vocal what's it called? Vocal doubler for my step. That makes it a bit wider. Maybe put in something like tremolo autopan. This one's pretty good. I like doing things like that. Start really slow. And set the stereo separation all the way. Okay, so automate that. Control from maybe from 0 here up to, is that 60 or so? Just a little bit quieter, and that's done. All right, guys, I'm kind of running out of steam. I need to go have some breakfast, I think. So that's kind of how I approach composing a little song demo like these. Start with a loop, build it up from a beat, start playing whatever I can think of to go along with it. I'll mess around with mute and solo and things like that on my control surface to come up with different song parts. I'll start using regions to duplicate sections and then use mute to turn things on and off, or I might just delete them. At some point, I'll kind of have a pretty rough, good idea of the structure of the song, and I'll start cleaning up things. So like the tom hits to make sure that they go out to the end. They're not cut off by the duplicated regions. Adding in effects, adding in transitions, swells and cymbal crashes, and automating the synth filters and special effects and things like that. That's kind of, and then I run out of steam and give up and then move on to the next thing. But yeah, that's my basic structure, workflow, all that kind of stuff. Hope you found this interesting. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.